So it says, we're going to look at verses 6 through 10 here. It says, "But Timothy has just now come to us from you and has brought good news about your faith and love. He has told us that you always have pleasant memories of us and that you long to see us just as we also long to see you. Therefore, brothers and sisters, in all our distress and persecution, we were encouraged about you because of your faith. For now we really live since you are standing firm in the Lord. How can we thank God enough for you in return for all the joy we have in the presence of our God because of you? Night and day we pray most earnestly that we may see you again and supply what is lacking in your faith." So Paul says in these verses that he hopes to return for the Thessalonians, and that his hopes for the Thessalonian believers were being realized instead of his fears for them. So these are encouraging. In fact, if you have the NIV, there's a little heading over that paragraph, and it says, Timothy's encouraging report. So Timothy had come back from Thessalonica to Paul when Paul was in Corinth. He had gone from Thessalonica to Berea, to Athens, and then to Corinth. What happened to Paul when he was in Athens? Okay, yeah, he preached on Mars Hill. He had gone to Berea. The Thessalonians had followed him there. Then he went to Athens. He preached on Mars Hill. There was a strong debate about what he had shared with them. You remember the content of that message, anybody? Kind of what did it center around? Okay, yeah. But his focus was the unknown God, right? Because the whole thing about Athens was they loved philosophy, they loved debate, they loved intellectualism, and they were multicultural, and so they had all the other gods. They had idols to all the gods, and they wanted to make sure that they didn't miss any, so they even had one idol to the unknown God. And so Paul's message to them was, let me tell you about this God that you don't know. And he preached to them about the God of the Bible and about Jesus Christ. And Mars Hill was a hill where they would all come and they would debate and they would talk and they would, share their ideas and so forth. And that's where Paul had preached. So from there, he then went to Corinth. And it is while in Corinth that Timothy returns from Thessalonica, and Silas also returns. But Timothy comes back from Thessalonica and tells him what is happening in the Thessalonian church. And Paul gets that report, and he says, it is good news. Timothy came back with good news about their faith and their love. Their faith and their love. So why would he report on those two things? The constant persecution by the other people in the city. But those really are the two stakes in the ground for where a person is in their relationship with Jesus Christ. What do you believe? And then are you loving? Your faith and your love. What do you believe? And are you a loving person? That should define us. That should define us. What if you believe all the right things and you're not loving? Yeah. Got to question whether you really believe it or not, right? So he came back with a report on their faith and their love. And Paul says here that part of the good news that Timothy reported back is that the church has such fond remembrances of Paul that they want to see Paul again. They're eager to see Paul again. Now, we've talked several times about why Paul can't go back. So Paul says that this was a great encouragement to Paul and Silas while they were there in Corinth, while they're undergoing distress and persecution. Verse 7, he says, therefore, brothers and sisters, in all our distress and persecution, we were encouraged about you because of your faith. Why have Paul and Silas been undergoing distress and persecution? They were preaching the gospel. So Paul says here, we're glad for the good news we've heard about you because it was a great encouragement to us in the midst of our persecution and trials, our distress and persecution, I'm sorry. And so what brought them the distress and persecution was preaching Jesus. What brings Paul and Silas encouragement are the results of preaching Jesus. Right? I mean, they're suffering distress and persecution for preaching Jesus, but then on the other end, hearing about the life change and the faith and love of people because of the gospel, that's an encouragement to them. That's a help to them. And Paul is effusive here in his gratitude for the good news coming out of Thessalonica. He says here, now we really live since you are standing firm in the Lord. They aren't letting suffering for Christ and persecution move them off the foundation of Jesus. Yes, it's hard. Yes, there's persecution. Yes, there's suffering. But they're not letting them move them off of Jesus. And he says they have joy in the presence of God because of the saved souls and the changed lives in the Thessalonian believers. And Paul says they are constantly in prayer that somehow they may somehow again meet up with the Thessalonian believers. And he says, and supply what is lacking in your faith. Supply what is lacking in your faith. And what this means is that Paul wants to have the opportunity to fill out the gaps in their instruction.